Welcome. It's Dena Churchill, Innovator in Health and Wellness. And I'm using my convener of the Atlantic Common Law Assembly hat this evening, interviewing Kevin Annett regarding sheriffs, lawful measures, and protection. So as you're coming into the chat box, we're on a Zoom meeting right now. I would love if you could keep your mic muted and your video off. It helps with the recording and maintains your privacy. If you do have any questions, I'd ask you to write them down and just hold them till we get halfway through. About the halfway mark, Kevin will present first, and then we'll check the chat box for questions and bring them in. And we love having you here. We love your questions. If you could put them in caps so I can see them, that would be great. And it's you that helps formulate kind of where we go with our Zoom meeting. So thank you. Kevin, did you want to start? Kevin Annett has really been a foundation for our local assembly. You know, he's given very generously of his time to help us establish our assembly, and not only us, but you know, the other 40 assemblies across Kanata, and is a global advisor to the International Common Law Courts. So we're really grateful to have you here. Thank you, Kevin.
Always good to be here with all of you, and new and old friends. So the topic, sheriff's enforcement protection, obviously a really important one. It has two aspects, kind of an internal and external, and I want to talk about both. Internal meaning within our group and how we operate now, external when we're acting in the world. And that's both really relevant. In a way, all of these topics are like a subset of a bigger issue, which is how do we actually establish a new society? How do we go about establishing our own laws, our own authority? Of course, the big one is right here, establishing it in our own minds. And that's something that happens through education, but it happens largely through experience. What works, what doesn't work. You know, the importance of staying together as groups is that we're able to learn together, generate common experiences, as opposed to just being off on your own reading a book somewhere. And so the issue of sheriffs in a way hasn't come up a lot because a lot of the assemblies have been doing the basic nuts and bolts of familiarizing themselves with ideas and with each other. And at the same time, security has reared its head in the example, which is more prominent on the West Coast, of actual sabotage and infiltration that's gone on in groups. And when we're new at these things, it's hard to recognize that when it's happening. It seems to just manifest as rumor and innuendo, and yet it isn't. That's the tip of a bigger iceberg. The old adage is nothing is ever done to us by anyone. It's done with us, with our cooperation, and that's very true in the example of black ops campaigns. The state is very sophisticated. They know how to break up groups very effectively. I've gone through it at least 3 times. And, you know, I like to, when you go through something, one of the advantages is you've had an experience. The other is that you can become jaded and you can say, okay, I see it coming, but none of these other people can. And the attitude of people who've been around these movements for a while is, I can't do anything to stop this from happening. People are just going to have to learn from their own experience because they don't listen to us anyway. We don't really, I mean, advice doesn't mean anything to us unless we've had an experience of it, and otherwise it's abstract. So in a way that's true. We have to go through that experience, and yet people who have been through it can spot the warning signs. And that's in fact one of the reasons I wrote the whistleblower manual. It's based on, you know, just not my ideas, but hard experiences of groups that we're in. That were taken down and how it went about it. Now, before any of that, though, was a whole question of our security. And starting within a group, and this was kind of one of the downsides of the assembly format where we just set up an assembly first, it's open to anybody. That's an advantage in terms of what it offers people, you know, in terms of, that we all know, you know, the ability to meet each other, and just feel free to start moving in new directions. And yet, it also is an open door for anybody who wants to come in. And it's hard to monitor when you don't know people. It's hard to know who they are or what their agenda is. And that can breed a lot of suspicion and distrust unless we go about it in kind of a sane way. So that, for example, when people keep asking questions and seem to be annoying because they keep making points, it doesn't mean they're trying to disrupt necessarily. It could just mean they have legitimate questions, right? So we always have to take everything with a grain of salt and not take ourselves too seriously, like I'm being targeted. The basic question is, why would we be targeted? Do we pose enough of a threat to the state that they would have to send people in? When we're just operating at the level of discussion, no, we're not. Words are fine. Protests for an hour are fine. Leafleting is fun. It doesn't threaten anybody. It's just exchanging ideas. When you start passing your own laws and saying we're going to follow these laws and not the laws of Canada, then you start becoming more of a threat. But you always have to kind of balance what we're doing with objectively stepping back and saying, why would they bother at this point, right? So I think in a lot of cases that's true. We can't overreact. We can't get too paranoid and afraid of, just new people showing up, because then that's doing the job of the state and we're destroying ourselves, which is the route they'd like us to go. They don't like using repression on us because then they look bad. They'd rather have us destroy ourselves. And, fear and inexperience can do that. So we have to take all of that and ourselves with a grain of salt all the time. So enforcement, I mean, this is really key to everything we're doing, not just in the issue of common law courts, but within the assemblies. When we make a decision, how do we enforce it? And what does enforcement mean? In our society, enforcement means the state forcing people to do what they want, right? It means the threat of a cop showing up. It's retributive justice. There's retribution. There's a consequence if you don't do what you're told. But for us, enforcement means enacting something new. So we pass a law, and then it's up to everybody to make sure that law happens. So, the September 4th law that banned COVID measures, it was then up to people to say, okay, we're going to enforce this now. How are we going to enforce it? We're going to start taking our masks off as a group. We're not going to distance. We're going to educate the people around us and say, did you know that these measures have been declared unlawful by we the people? And that has authority and that has power. And even the cops agree with us. The classic case in Victoria where the cops said to one of our people, oh yeah, if they're trying to make you mask, just show them that law, September 4th, because he was acknowledging that it has power when people gather together and make a decision that something is real, then it becomes real, but only if you follow through on it and enforce it. And that's the part where we're missing, because, we did a count, and when that September 4th law came out, barely 1/3 of our groups across the country did anything with it. Some even broke up over it. Like the Parksville group got sabotaged right after they brought it in, right? And that was sabotage. So we are learning, we're still trying to get our minds around from that 1/3 indicator. A lot of us are still trying to get our minds around the fact that we can do this, that we have sovereign authority to do it. And so that's the big hurdle, I think, even more than black ops and attacks. The biggest hurdle is convincing ourselves that we have the authority to do this and that it has power in the world. Once we believe that and act as if it's true, then there's that ripple, that change that starts. And people, that's why, when we pass these bylaws and then eventually the national law on September 4th, that's when hundreds of people started coming to us, because that struck a note of hope in all of them. You mean we can do something? We don't have to just run. We don't have to hide. We don't have to, find a way to defend ourselves. We can be proactive, and that's got to be the energy we operate under all the time. We create. We are proactive. We set the terms of battle, like Sun Tzu says all the time. You won the battle before it's fought if you set the terms of battle. You define the issues. Don't wait for them. If you're just reacting to the state all the time, they've won already. That's kind of bottom line. If you are just reactive, they're setting the terms. They have the bigger force at the moment, and so they'll win. But all of that is part of how we really enforce decisions that we make, not just common law court decisions or laws we pass, but anything we decide to do together. I think the final point I want to make is related to all that, and as you experienced with Andrew and Shannon on the East Coast, having an urgent response network is so vital, because when people are targeted, and I just heard, from Andrew that they're getting harassed again. When that happens, we have to have an organized response, not just, hey, I'll see who's home, who can come out, but there are these people on the list who have promised that they will respond to a phone call to get out there and like Dena and others did, stand there, monitor it, dampen down the effect of their attack, and just redirect their energy along the lines that we want. And so organizing that urgent response network is really essential in any group, no matter how small. Because then if we don't have it, we can't really protect ourselves. And who wants to be part of a group that can't protect its own members? So, and that's especially vital too. And the last point I want to make is there's a bulletin coming out from the National Council this week, and they're talking about national campaigns. They've been kind of monitoring a lot of the work of all the different groups, and they've come up with 3 issues that people keep talking about all the time. Obviously, the COVID measures, how to resist them, how to nullify them. The second is child protection, and the third is taxation. And they're asking people to think of how we can create national campaigns around those issues. For example, defunding the federal government, keeping federal tax money in our own communities, actively protecting our children, because the mandatory vaccinations, which will probably be in by the end of the year, are aimed at children. They're like the genocide measures in residential schools. It's the same program. And that's got to be taken really seriously. And that can unite a lot of people across the country, just those, that especially, that whole thing of how to protect our children and go on the offensive against the system doing this. So I'm going to leave it at that. Any comments or questions or anything?
Kevin, there was a video that we'd sent out to the membership, and this was put out by a lady B from the UK, and she talked about empowering yourself during COVID measures during COVID and tools in dealing with government enforcement agencies like the police. So some of the suggestions she had, and maybe you can give feedback, is if you're approached by a police officer or a government enforcement agency, is to stand under common law immediately. So she says, to say you're no longer part of that jurisdiction and they have no authority over you. How do you feel about that?
That's kind of basic. That's how we approach within Kanata. Especially if you've taken out citizenship and you can show the card and say, look, I've renounced allegiance. I'm under a new jurisdiction. You're respectful and polite and everything. You just tell them, you educate them, right? And if it goes further, you have to ask them by what authority they're doing it for them to ever recite their oath of office and to document it. I mean, ideally, it's good to never do anything by yourself. Of course, we're stopped sometimes when we're by ourselves, but if we're out doing public actions or any kind of thing, try to have at least one other person with you so there can be witnesses to these things. Right?
And when you're asked if you understand, apparently, as you've talked about before too, this means that you're going to stand under the law of the sea, which is not what we want to do. So instead of saying, it's not to say you understand, just say you don't answer any questions. Is that what you'd advise?
That's right. And if you say no, it can be interpreted as a obstruction of justice or resisting arrest, and they can get you on that basis. So you don't say yes or no, you just don't answer.
And I think there was one other, if they're asking for your name, what would you advise?
Same thing, you don't have to give it, and in fact, don't give it, because a name is a slave designation they gave you when they incorporated you with the birth registration. So when you're using the slave name, you're de facto saying, yes, I'm following that jurisdiction in which I was incorporated, which means to make part of a dead body. But I, the living man or woman, I stand outside that designation.
So what about if someone was serving you papers and they said, are you Dena Churchill? And they have legal documents in their hand.
Well, Paul Kaliba in Brighton, Ontario, who might be listening, and I don't know, he's one of the organizers there, he was in that situation in court, and unless I'm misquoting him, what I believe he said was, I'm not that corporate designation. You're referring to a corpse, not to me. So you just point out the fact that on any summons, it's the capitalized letter. You say, that is simply not me. That's a dead body. I don't identify with that. And then because you've separated that as it is, you're not in their matrix, right?
And Lynn, one of our members, had emailed me today. I know you've covered this before, but I told her I would mention it because she sent it in as a question. Will becoming a member of Kanata interfere with her benefits from the Canadian government?
No, because like we say, the benefits come from the corporate designation. So you operate in that corporate fiction, and they're not affected because we don't operate in their world. We operate in the natural law world. So no, it doesn't affect it at all, unless you make a point of going out and, probing the system and challenging and confronting them, as people do sometimes. Say, hey, I've stepped out. Then if you shake the lion's tail, yeah, they might bite. But if you just operate with that corporate name, the two don't meet, right? You're invisible to the system except through that corporate name. And we found that time and again, they just don't acknowledge you if you're not in the corporate designation. So.
Interesting. Thank you. So we'll take a few questions here. Dylan, who's our new administrator. Thank you for being here, Dylan. Is there a particular procedure to becoming a justice of the peace?
You mean within the existing system or within the Republic? Because if it's within the existing system, that's probably something that other people can answer better than me. I don't know the technical procedure of becoming justices of the peace because it varies from province to province. It's my understanding. Within the Republic, there are not justices of the peace per se. There are court officials. The magistrate within a common law court is an advisor to the jury. He doesn't have the power that a judge does in this system of rewriting court records and dismissing juries and all that. The jury is the source of power. So that within the Republic, that's a whole discussion we do in common law training manual. But he'd have to clarify, did he mean in the system or, in the Republic? Dylan's answer. Okay. So yeah, there are court officers, for example, notaries, and that point has been made already about the need for public notaries, the ways to verify documents. All of that is actually gone into in detail if you read the common law training manual. I don't know if you have yet, Dylan, but the court officers and procedures are all in here. So I might answer your question.
And Carolyn just came on here. Carolyn actually put that video of B and the UK common law into a PDF, into a document that she was so kind to check with B to make sure it was okay to print it, and has it in a document. So if you need that, Carolyn, I don't know if you want to put your email address in there or if you want me to share it, but thank you for doing that. Brent said, have you come up with something different than citizenship, which leads to admiralty law? I'm a living man. How do we arrest Bonnie Henry, Teresa Tam, and King Trudeau?
Yeah, people keep saying that. Let's go get them. Well, there's a lot of scuttlebutt out that somehow the word citizen equals admiralty law. That's just not accurate. I mean, I've never seen any evidence of that. We have to be careful of misinformation because somebody on the internet, some hired gun, can suddenly say, oh no, like republic means dictatorship. Like you can chase around your whole life following various people's interpretations, but you just go on precedents and sources. And republic really originated from the ancient Athenian model of democracy, of participatory democracy, where citizens were obligated to rule themselves, to govern themselves, to make laws. Not like now. Because you're not a citizen in Canada, you're a subject of the crown. You're an appendage of your piece of property owned by the city of London. And so a citizen is a negation of all that, and it's inherently sovereign. So that's our understanding. And if people want to produce other sources or information about that, that's credible and has some reference somewhere, then yeah, let's look at it. But just somebody claiming that without any basis is not very helpful,
I'm a living man. How do we arrest Bonnie Henry, Teresa Tam, and King Trudeau?
Well, we haven't arrested the Pope yet, but he's still prisoner in the Vatican because of the work we did. So there's different kinds of arrest. When you get people so scared they don't want to show up in public, that's a form of arrest. Don't forget they're just hand puppets too. I mean, so you arrest them and they bring in somebody to replace them. It's not so much arresting individuals as stopping these measures. And I mean, they also don't forget that they're ready for that. They're ready, and over the years, people have tried that. They tried to Splitting the Sky. One of my Mohawk friends said, "I'm going to arrest George Bush." So he went down to the hotel and he personally tried to arrest him, and there were 20 goons on his back with guns in his head. Right? It's like all that cheese scares people. And so it's not what we're about. We're about nullifying their measures, and then they'll drop away like leaves, the bad guys. I mean, different focus, right?
Republic, free public, Democrats, demon crap, Brent says.
Oh, well.
Yes, that's his interpretation.
But again, political parties are hand puppets, folks. The same hand is holding both.
Great. Any other questions for Kevin? So Carolyn, again, has that document. She had sent it to me. So if you want to get it from Carolyn, that's great. She's just put her email up there, or you can email me. So again, thank you for doing that, Carolyn. Members of the Assembly, some members aren't always present at our meetings, but Vanjie was somebody who copied our laws and copied information and delivered it to 50 small businesses. Down at the rally on the weekend, there were two people there, and they were handing out sort of mask information in their little community in the valley. So, and this was the first time I kind of met them. So there's people that are a part of the membership that you might not see, but I think part of being kind of a sovereign mind is taking it upon yourself, not waiting for somebody to give you direction, but seeing what you need to do and what your skills are and what you feel like you can make changes in your family or your community, and sort of picking up the ball instead of, waiting for somebody else to tell you what to do. So those people are there and they're doing that. So I appreciate you, Carolyn, and Vanjie, and I think her name was Hobby Bonnie, who I seen on the weekend. Have a question I wish to speak. So yes, you can go ahead and put it in the chat box if you would, Karen. And what's the best action we can be performing in our own community? What's the best actions right now we can be performing?
You're the best judge of that, but anything that's going to fly the flag more, get our message out, get people feeling that they can do something and not just be victims, right?
Someone says there's many concerns regarding vaccination, masks, social distancing in the future for my children and grandchildren. So vaccination and masks, social distancing for sure, COVID measures. You can speak, Karen, if you want to just put your question there, that would be great. Or do you want?
No, I think it's important that we're able to talk, right? Because what's going on here is communication between you and Kevin. That's not an assembly in my mind. There's a lot of things that have been bothering me about this assembly, and I like to speak freely. I find that it's been run top down. Never in my life have I been associated with anything that somebody else is dictating what the mission should be, what the Constitution should be. Always it's presented as, here's something similar, take it and make it your own. So I have a question, Kevin. How come you haven't done that?
Done what? You'll have to, I didn't hear everything you said. Done what?
I said never in my life, and I've been involved in a lot of different things. I've never been involved with anything that it's been dictated. Here's your mission. Here's your Constitution.
It's not dictated. Those are.
You've never said take this information and make it your own. I have no idea.
I guess you haven't followed what we're doing, because we've been saying that from the very beginning.
And if I might speak, Karen, Tara, who's our Justice and Education Coordinator, and Kirsten, and a few other people are working on a mission statement right now. So if you'd like to take part in that, you can connect with Tara, and they're formulating it. So it wasn't something that was dictated.
Wow, when did this come into place? Because I've been screaming about wanting to be involved in this for weeks now.
So after our meeting?
And okay, what I don't like, this logo creation. It wasn't sent out to the group to submit requests or to submit logos and have a vote on it. It was handed over to one or two people to come up with it. This is not a fair and equal way, in my opinion, to be operating. I brought that forward. My concerns aren't being answered, and you're laughing.
No, what I'm laughing is that Linda is on the line, and Linda had, these are sort of internal issues with our assembly that should be brought up at a meeting, not at a, a public.
There's never an opportunity to bring it up. And I messaged people, I messaged you, you just bluntly don't even answer. And you lied. You said that it was put out to the assembly.
Let me interject. This is Carla Wilczuk. I'm the chair of the Greater Edmonton Common Law Assembly, and I'm also the Alberta convener. And, just to verify that we've been working closely with Kevin, and we have never experienced a point at which he said we had to do something or we had to adopt a particular train of thought or constitution or charter or what have you. But it's nice to have the templates in place to work from. And then we made them our own and we changed them, we changed some of the words, and it was very, very collaborative and very supportive in nature.
Well, so another question I have is, why are you guys part of our Zoom?
Karen,
Why?
This is a public Zoom, so it's not just our members here. We have people that are members and non-members from all over Canada, the UK. So these internal issues should be at our meeting, not really at a public Zoom.
But they don't get brought up though, Dena. They don't get addressed. I've been trying to
You seem
communicate.
to be bringing them up quite effectively.
So,
yeah, you could do this internally rather than where there's a lot of other people interested in learning the material.
well, I think it's
That's more of an eminent nature, because right now to quibble over little things like logos and what have you, when children are going to be literally injected and whatnot, it's a matter of benefits and priority right now. So everybody's really working very quickly to mitigate some of the horrendous things that are coming down the pipeline. And in order to do that—
Exactly, and in order to do that, you have to have an action plan and walking forward. We have nothing.
Well, come up with one, Karen. Why don't you come up with one, Karen?
Yeah.
Come up
So
with one
staying
instead of complaining about it.
Staying in the vibration of solution has been something that has been really super important for us. When individuals are sort of putting the small stuff before the really huge stuff, then, of course, every executive has to look at the items and go, which are the most important things to do right now? And sometimes things have to be tabled for the sake of time. So, I'm hoping that you'll have the grace to let the Atlantic Assembly continue to do their good work, because everybody's at risk right now. So that's all I'll say.
Well, the Atlantic Assembly is at risk right now because there's a lot of people that aren't happy with what's happening in it, and there's no real forum to address it.
So I'm just reading the comments. Dylan agrees with Carolot. Chris agrees, move on. Brent says, amen. Let's stay on topic, says Chris. Purpose, one Karen is Dylan. Brent says the vibration of the solution, love it, amen. So Karen, if you don't mind, I think we'll move on to the next question. Thank you. So we talked, actually, you might be able to answer this, Carla, and thank you, because we appreciate, that you've been growing your assembly and appreciate your feedback that you're giving to us. What would you say is the most important thing, outside of looking at kind of protection, in creating unity and strength within our own individual assemblies?
Well, I think that there's always going to be those that have their own individual agendas. And so we were told right from the beginning, the best advice we heard was make sure that your internal workings are strong and your core is strong before you expand too much. And we expanded a little fast and we got a little infiltrated, and we had those that put personal agendas ahead of everything else, and it got messy. And the way we brought unity back was to basically go, you know what, you have this focus and maybe you need to do that over there. We worked very hard on a vision and a mission, and we read that before every single meeting. We read it before every single education information session, and because it's so that everyone can get really into focus what the assembly is really about. So if you want to see what our mission and vision is, and we didn't start from scratch, we went to the manuals for that, and we may have tweaked some words and taken out some extraneous words, but we made it our own. But that's on www.GECLA, so that's the acronym for Greater Edmonton Common Law Assembly, GECLA.ca, and our mission and vision will be there. So having that fully in our train of focus, and then you know, from there we have immense amounts of different kinds of topics and things that we're addressing, but we can have people that are maybe in membership with their own task forces, their own committees. It doesn't all have to sit within the executive. And then, you know, committee reports come in and we read them all. We don't, you know, we don't gloss over anything, but we do prioritize, because these are you know, important times, let's put it that way, to do that.
Thanks, Carla. Anyone, before you go, maybe
Thanks.
anybody have any questions for Carla before she signs out? I just seen Dena come on there, and Dena is from the Vancouver Assembly. So Dena, I don't know if you have any thoughts on what you do to create unity and strength in your assembly. Brent says, thank you, Carla. Okay, well, thanks again. We really appreciate your wisdom and
I mean, you know, the forces that we're up against, they're highly coordinated, and they've been working at this for some time. So I think if everybody could just remember that and know that we have a lot to do in a short amount of time. And so some of these little things that bother you, if you can just set that aside, and if it takes, you know, starting your own committee, your own task force, that's fine. That not, you know, that the assembly will consider and maybe even coordinate and help, but that not everything needs to be within that executive. That's going to be the main thing. So good luck with that, everybody.
Well said,
thanks, Carla. Kevin, do you have any comment on that?
No, she said it perfectly.
So a question from Joanne. Are you concerned about the UN timeline, Kevin? And can you speak on that?
The UN timeline?
Mm-hmm.
I can't, because I don't know what their timeline is. I don't have that information. But I think a lot of people have surmised a lot of things, you know, the whole Agenda 2020 thing. Now, of course, you know, it's kind of a rule that you see what you're allowed to be seen to. They show you what they want you to see. Okay, so long-term plans and everything, I don't think we ultimately know. We can only go on how it impacts us, and what we know over a lifetime, you develop a sense of what we're in, right? That's just life. School of Hard Knocks. It teaches you what you're dealing with, and I think people spend way too much time trying to understand the details, as if we can figure out what they are thinking. Because don't forget, this is not about them doing anything to us. This is a culmination of something we've all been involved in. We've all contributed to this genocidal machine at work, and it's blowing back on us now. So it's when you take that personal responsibility, right? And you realize, well, I'm responsible for this. I remember I wrote an article once, and I gave this in a sermon and got a lot of people mad, but it said, when I was 8 years old, I used to put money every week in the United Church collection plate. I'd put my $1 and put in the collection plate in Sunday school, right? And that money went towards funding residential schools that was killing Native children. So even as an 8-year-old, I was funding the murder of children. You know, under the law, ignorance of a crime is no defense. I was still complicit, even if I wasn't aware of it, and I would be horrified if I knew about it. But that's kind of a microcosm of the whole thing we're involved in. So instead of looking to the enemy out there, why don't we look in the mirror first and take responsibility and change it here, and then the change spreads. That's what we're able to do, not figure out who's going to do this to us, which is a big myth, I think, right?
So there's a question here from Nadia. Are you familiar with the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights?
Yes, that's the UN declaration. Yep.
And Ernest, I don't know if this question is for you, but what is the International Tribunal for Natural Justice?
I can tell you what it is from my experience. In 2015, they formed 5 years after our tribunal, the ITCCS, the International Tribunal for Crimes of Church and State. I've never met Sasha Stone or Robert David Steele, but they, last year in the spring, after I interviewed some survivors of Mormon cults that were describing similar sacrificial rites going on in the Mormon church as in the Catholic church, within 2 days, both of them started attacking me over the internet, saying I was crazy, I should be arrested. They're going to notify the Canadian government to have me arrested. They just started this total nutty campaign to go after Kevin Annett, which is not a new thing. I mean, people do it all the time for some reason. But, you know, it was an obviously contrived thing. I was contacted by Cynthia McKinney, former Congresswoman, who was an ITNG trustee. And she said, I quit because they were all trying to get us incited against you. And I know your work and I respect you. But they literally threatened people that you've got to get on board with this campaign. And I had questions. I never attacked ITNG or anything. I don't do tit for tat, but they were holding their events in big swanky facilities in downtown London. Sasha Stone has a resort in Bali. They've got millions and millions of dollars, and they take people's testimonies and never tell people what they're going to do with them. So I have real questions about it, not simply because they went ballistic on me for some reason, but their whole way of doing it. And the last thing you want to do with survivors of trauma is to just keep their statements, like the Canadian government did with Indian children and residential school survivors. Just hide all the information and keep it to themselves. It's not a trustworthy way to operate. And so I've got those questions, but I don't really care. I know a lot of these smears now and the things that are going up here from some people about what about this and what about that. You know, I've been fielding this stuff for 15 to 20 years, and it's all tends to come from the same source. It was a crafted source. And it relates very much to the whole topic of Black Ops, right? And the way we've seen it operate already in Canada through different groups. Don't forget, I'm just going to end on this, I don't want to belabor the point, but any organization that forms, any grassroots movement is very quickly approached and made an offer. And they said, you know, you can get funding, you can get media coverage if you do X, Y, and Z, you know, and you got to do this. And then it's called controlled opposition, switch. Like the classic case, I don't know if you know it, but Greenpeace is actually funded by what's called the Pew Foundation, which is controlled by Sunoco, Sun Oil Company. So Sun Oil Company actually determines the campaigns Greenpeace should be working on because they control their trust fund, you know, that funds them. And any movement is eventually approached in that way and given an option. You know, you either are play outside, get on side and play with us, or you're going to be targeted and no one's ever going to know about you. You're going to get no media coverage and the whole thing. So don't forget, those forces operate all the time. And if we haven't been approached already, we will be at some point. Your local groups, whoever, we know that happened in Vancouver Island and wrecked every group we had there. But that's the way that operates. And that's a long answer, sorry for belaboring that point, but it's important for people to know these things.
Yeah, and Charlene says, why are we getting this information now? Actually, Carla and Dena and Paul had contributed information, Charlene, to our mission. So I had emailed them. Kevin had given me their contact information just last week, I think, or maybe it was the week before. And Tara now has their replies as she's working on the mission statement. So she has that information. Klaus in his book, Klaus Schwab, in his book, The Great Reset, The Blueprint. Do you see that there, Kevin? I don't know what the question is. Maybe is there a question, Franz, for that? An in-depth plan? Maybe it was just a statement, an in-depth plan laid out for the next 10 years. Brent says, fraud, treason, genocide. I'm starting with the man in the mirror. Dylan says, are you ready to mentally to serve notice of liability to the government institutions and businesses and hold them accountable for COVID measures? click the link to share your vote and give your feedback. Okay, so Dylan is our newly elected administrator, and he has set up this mighty network, so I guess he has something there to vote upon. Dena, oh, Dena's here, great. So this is Dena, Secretary. Dena, do you want to come on and say what, how you think we can strengthen and bring unity into our assembly? You can just unmute yourself and turn on your video if you'd like, or if not, I can just read it out here. So Dena is the secretary from the newly named Greater Vancouver Republic of Kanata, just spending time with family, but wanted to check in and say hello. Oh, thank you. Happy birthday to your mom. I'm excited to keep igniting this vision and forging forward with our new cell group structure in the Greater Vancouver area. I believe the best is yet to come for all of us, and it's now a time to get ready and form our Republic of Kanata as sovereign men and women and children. Have a great day, and you watch it on YouTube. Thank you so much for dropping in. And Nadia says, are you familiar with Edward J. Robbins? If so, what are your thoughts about his teachings?
No, I don't know who that is.
Okay, Brent is thanking you, Dana. Awesome. Salt Springs Island is where Brent is from. Nadia, so Randy Hillier in Ontario is now offering lawn signs that encourage ending the lockdowns. So could this be something for the Republic of Kanata would consider as a way to promote the Republic? So with
all of the above, yeah.
Paul, is this Paul from, oh, Paul. So Paul, did you have any thoughts? You're from the Assembly. Kanata, is that in Ontario, Kevin?
Yeah, that's the group around Brighton, Southern Ontario, Canadario.
Paul, if you wanted to come on, you don't have to, but if you had any thoughts on how to bring unity and strength to our assemblies in these tedious times, you can unmute and come on. Or you can type it in and I can read it out. Anastasia says, Greenpeace lost her respect for Greenpeace. Our assembly is top down, says Karen. You know, that I think it's important for everybody to realize we're all sovereign men and women. So nobody gave us direction to serve papers on Zach Churchill in Yarmouth. You know, we did that as a small cell group. No one gave us direction to go to the department, education department, and, you know, serve papers there and have a little protest. No one directed me to serve the Unmask package and mask information to our local police department. So I think it's up to us as sovereign men and women to see what's important to us, what our skills are, and then to direct it out there. Our assembly is really a gathering. It's a group for us to come together and discuss our ideas, but it's each of our responsibilities to pick up that ball and run with it wherever it is. Thank you to Karen for your voice. We need open dialogue. And Karen, we're having a Zoom this weekend. Karen actually hosted, thank you for that. Karen hosted our meeting on last Friday. So we had great feedback from that everybody had a voice, and it was a good opportunity to bring up the issues that we had. Are you up, not up on the Great Reset book then, Kevin? Do you know about the Great Reset? No?
Well, I've heard about it over the years, yeah.
And Paul can't talk because he's in Tim Hortons. Okay, thank you, Paul. Well, if you have any thoughts on, you know, bringing strength and unity to our assemblies, feel free to put it up there. And Dylan shares, again, our Mighty Network link for our members. So if it's just a members only site, Dylan, this is a public meeting. So I don't know if that's any consideration. Great ideas for signs and lockdowns. If you wanted to elaborate on that, Bobby. Michael says he wanted to respond. So we'll allow that just to stay in the chat box there. And are you familiar, Vanjie? Oh, Vanjie delivered all those flyers to businesses. So thanks, Vanjie, for being on. Are you familiar with the House of Commons petition website for freedom of choice? No?
No, what is that?
Can you explain it, Vanjie?
I didn't know they were in session.
Okay, any other questions? We have about 15 minutes. Kevin, is there anything that you would like, any, protective advice for our assemblies that you haven't given already, or ways that we can create strength and unity? I feel like if we're always focused on protecting ourselves, we're kind of in survival mode, where our energies are negative entropy, we're creating kind of disillusion within ourselves. If we can kind of keep kind of in our executive mind center, focused on where we're going, it's like it creates energy and direction. So I don't know what, always, thinking about how we're going to protect ourselves, I think puts us in survival mode. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, very much like I was saying earlier, we have to always be creating our own space, but that's not an easy thing for people to do, because a lot of us haven't even reclaimed our own minds. We're still in the infantile, blame game. You didn't do this for me. Unfortunately, I've first had experience of that as a minister, but also working in the healing circles, where Native people were basically still in a slave mentality, saying, you people did this to us, now you've got to give us this. And if you don't, you're the enemy. So it's always a question of people acting out of, you people are doing something wrong, you've got to fix it for me, because I can't do it myself. Well, that's slave thinking. And if people have a criticism, the first thing they have to create is, okay, I don't like this, but I suggest this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to create this, and I'm going to go try this and see if it works. If they're not going to do the second, the first is pointless. The criticism by itself is like a little child yelling, right? And we have to move beyond infantile thinking. And that's hard because it's so ingrained in all of us. I mean, we're all raised that way in this culture. But often when we get kicks in the head and we realize that our life and the lives of others depend on us changing, then we realize we have to. And like Carla was saying, they're gathering up children as we speak. They're quarantining, they're vaccinating, they're applying the methods of genocide used against those brown children on everybody now. And if that isn't a wake-up call for people, and we'd rather throw stones at each other, then we deserve everything we get, if that's where we're going to act. But those of us who are willing to not be that way have to be proactive and always be out there creating a new, what we want to see, right? And we just can't get distracted by all this shit, right? It's a kiss of death. And, there's probably more to say about that, but I'm very much agree with that whole thrust of what you're saying.
And did you want to talk about what the lady you interviewed on your radio show this week? Or is it next week with the organ donation or organ?
It's this coming week, and I haven't confirmed yet that she's going to be on the air. I don't know, Carl, if you want to comment on her case at all. I don't want to go into the details for confidentiality reasons, but it does have to do with organ trafficking. While people are still not legally dead.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Carla.
So the intention is that Kevin will interview her on his show on Sunday, and I haven't posed that to her yet. I've been busy organizing his whole tour, but she's a very extraordinary, strong woman that is so willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that no other mother, no other daughter or son is ever taken in this way. So, and it's more prevalent than I think any of us could have possibly imagined. So she's a beautiful, beautiful witness. She has a 30-year medical administration background, so she's well-spoken. She knows how to read the reports and present the information, and she has collected reams of evidence. So,
and the term, I noticed even the doctors who she spoke to used the term harvested. He was harvested.
Yeah.
I mean, they openly use these terms like the herd management terminology in vaccinations. And, I mean, they were literally referring to us as cattle to be harvested.
Yeah, and you know, it's extraordinary to listen to her story and just how she was just ascended upon by all of these different agents, and really coerced. And you know, to have a loved one at all in a position like that, let alone your born son, that they want something from, and to not really be able to do anything about it. It's just, it's outrageous. So we really are able to witness her courage and her commitment to do something in a very strong and powerful way to the best of her ability. And thankfully she's trusted us, Kevin, to help her with this.
Thank you, Carla.
Yeah, you bet.
I think that's a benefit too of us all being, you know, together and linking with other assemblies. Is, you know, we're having a case right now with our sheriff and our public relations coordinator, and involvement kind of with government. So what I suggested to them on a Zoom call just before this one was, you know, utilizing our resources nationwide, even globally. And when we have a case like the one that you're talking about, or a case that we're having locally, then we have that as a benefit to kind of draw on the network, you know, for love and wisdom in the group. So we appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for all the work you do, Dena and Kevin, and everyone else there that I don't really know yet.
So we had another question, I think. Have you seen the cycleoffreedom.com, the sovereigns in England who have issued arrest warrants for all their MPs? Fiona sent out the link.
Nope. I mean, you know, warrants are fine. Enforcement is the issue. How are we going to do it?
And Paul from his assembly in Ontario is still working on a focus. Lots of work being done outside the assembly meetings. So thank you, Paul, and thank you for your input into our mission, and Tara has that information. Diane Marie, I find it sad that many parents are lining up to get their children vaccinated. Any thoughts on that, Kevin?
It's, yeah. I don't want to say the obvious. We're all feeling, I'm sure, the horror of that when people feel compelled to do that to their own children, but it's nothing new. Like I said, it's been the norm in Canada for 100 and some odd years with Indians. I don't know.
Paul says our assembly is not having regular meetings right now because we're all still researching and gaining more knowledge to gain a focus. So we're not wasting people's time and energy and resources. So you're looking at that. Michael and Sevier are talking about a group, a cell group that they have in the Valley in Nova Scotia, and they're going to be hosting our next meeting and have offered a workshop for members. This is a public meeting. Yes, it is. It is a public meeting, Paul. And Ernest says the Bank of Canada is working on a digital currency launch, and they're not hiding this fact. Do you think they'll use the digital currency in ways that might violate the common law, Kevin? No.
They always do. They usually do. Yeah. I don't know. I would economic shit and banking and that, so don't quote me.
Anastasia says she'd love to implement protocols for dealing with authorities, the steps we take in dealing with issues such as Shannon and Andrews. So with Shannon and Andrew, do you think, you know, if somebody comes to the door, they should not give their names, you know, that, how would you handle that, Kevin?
No, never give names. Ask for their ID and authority and tell them to leave exactly the way Andrew did. He did it exactly right. Andrew can tell you better than I can because he went through it.
Andrew, do you want to,
yeah.
did you want to comment on that now, or do you want to wait and do it at another time? Thank you, Anastasia. I would love
Oh
to.
yeah, it doesn't much matter. Yeah, I just don't acknowledge myself as being the person they claim me to be. Is the simplest way to put it. I just disavow myself as Andrew Mader. That's not who I am. That's who they created and trying to jam me in that box. I don't identify as him. So when they show me a paper or ask me, "Are you Andrew Mader?" I, with all the confidence in the world, can look them in the eyes and say, "No, I don't identify as that person." Said, I don't know anything about that. And, you know, you're trespassing. I'd ask you to leave my property immediately. So it's just as simple as that. They what are they going to do in that situation other than leave?
Mhm. And Dylan's asking about speaking to the emergency network. So Dylan, if you want to speak about that, just remember this is a public meeting, record it and put it on a public domain. But
Yeah.
go ahead. Yeah.
Yep, and that's totally fine. So the network has been set up and it is intended for the public. So it is an open forum. So I'd welcome everyone. I'll put the link in here. It's not a secure network to begin with, so I'm not going to pretend it is, but it is a great network for people to connect. For instance, people that are interested in setting up emergency response groups. It's easy to facilitate that there. I cast a poll earlier and put the link before. It's a very 2.0 way to democratize our process and to collaborate and to make some real traction, because there's a lot of very motivated people in this chat room, and it shouldn't shut down at 8 o'clock or 8:15. It should carry on with a lot of people that want to keep going. And please go join the network. And all the topics are set up in there, and it's all very streamlined. I'll put it one more time. That's my shtick. You guys have a good one.
That's great. Thank you, Dylan. Thanks. So we're almost at the hour. I don't know if there's any other comments, questions. Kevin, do you have any closing thoughts that you want to finish with?
Well, just a couple of announcements. There's people hopefully have received copies of the proposed constitution. And along with that is a bulletin coming out from the National Council of the Republic this week with updates, a lot of really important information. And I hope everybody reads that. And Dena and everybody else on my list will have copies. So please circulate that and give feedback all the time. People have been saying, okay, no, we want this as the flag. I say, good, make a proposal, send it as an amendment. We'll talk about it at the Constitutional Convention in April. So we want to generate that feedback from people. So please act on what we send you, and tune in this Sunday to our show as well.
Great. And I would just like to say, if you're trying to reach me, the Gmail address is at the top, or Proton Mail. There's a lot of other platforms that I don't check regularly, only when I have the time and energy, but you can always reach me on email. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for your questions. And thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you being here. Carla, Dana, Paul, members from the other assembly, members from our assembly who are commenting and working so hard. So thank you too. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone. See you all soon.